Good morning. This is Friday, April 24th, 2020, and this is Pastor John with Today in the Headlines. Number 1, pandemic and resurgence. Number 2, Russia, internal trouble and trouble with others. Number 3, there's been a big movement for women's rights. And number 4, lots and lots of technological innovation. And that is today's In the News. But what if I told you that I get this news from a stream that gives me headlines from 100 years ago? Not today, not 2020, but headlines from 1920. Do these headlines sound familiar? Of course they do. And isn't it amazing how history seems to repeat itself? Sure, the world is much different today than it was then. There's no doubting that. But it is amazing how, taken even just in headlines or taken in the written word, things seem so similar. Today we are continuing our study of Romans. This is part 2, and it coincides with chapters 3 and 4 of the book of Romans, which, if you are reading by now, you have seen that there is a lot of Paul introducing himself early in Romans chapter 1, but now is talking a lot about who he is and who he thinks God is and who God makes him. And there is a lot of talk about Judaism and how it relates to others. One of the things that's lost on us when we read this, underneath all of these headlines, is that Paul is putting himself in a long line of people. In Jeremiah, God says to the prophet, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you," God says to Jeremiah, "as a prophet to the nations." In the early part of Romans, much of the conversation between Judaism and Gentiles, the word there, Gentiles, could be interpreted or filled out or put in that place as this word nations. And what is really happening is Paul sees what God is doing in the world and what is happening all around him in a very distinct way. He thinks because Jesus has come, time and history have moved into a new era and a new place, that God is developing the world around us. But that God continues to call people and have them go not just to the people that they know, but also to all the world around them. So this morning, as you read from Romans, I would remind you that history does indeed repeat itself, but that God is developing it and bringing it somewhere, and that God fills our lives with people, and sometimes even fills our hearts with God's word, in a way that all of us are set in front of history as people who are doomed to repeat it, except God calls us from out of it and promises to make us new. Often we focus on brokenness and separateness and how different things are from one week to the next, or how different somebody else is from us. But God's promise is that all of us are in this situation together, and that God promises to send people and God's word that brings all of us to a place together through the midst of whatever headline it is that faces us today. And instead of watching or focusing on brokenness, God's call is a call to stand together and see everybody being made new. So that is your reflection for Romans for today. I hope you have a great one. I hope you do take the chance to read from Romans, and I'll continue with these in the coming days. Be safe. See you soon.